Good evening and welcome to News Night. I'm Amrit Pal Singh. This is a show in which we tell you what happened in the country and around the world in the day just gone by. We'll tell you what were the big stories that happened today. Well, the monsoon session of Parliament saw its second day today. There was uproar in the Lok Sabha after 3 adjournments. Finally, the Lok Sabha had to be adjourned. The Prime Minister expressed displeasure on the attitude of the opposition parties to disrupt, saying they should come and participate in the discussion. Also, the government, the Health Minister in the Rajya Sabha asserted that the Union government never suppressed data regarding COVID-19 deaths in the country. It only compiled and put out the data that was given out to the states. Also, the situation in Afghanistan, as the President and his cabinet were offering Eid prayers in Kabul. The President's palace, rockets landed near the President's palace. What really that means, we'll talk about that and discuss that with our guests in the studio tonight. Also, we'll tell you what else transpired in the country and around the world. Let's begin with the headlines we're tracking at this hour. Minister Mansukh Mandavia replies to the debate on COVID in Rajya Sabha, asserts the centre never suppressed data on COVID deaths, says government only complied data provided by states, appeals to parties not to politicize the issue. Fourth nationwide Sero survey finds COVID antibodies in more than 2/3 of the population, says 40 crore Indians still susceptible to infection. Finds antibodies in more than 50% of the children surveyed. Health Ministry advocates opening of primary schools first, then the secondary schools. Supreme Court expresses strong displeasure over Kerala government's decision to relax COVID-19 restrictions ahead of Bakrid. Court calls the state government's decision to allow shops to open in areas where positivity rate exceeds 15% as a sorry state of affairs. Second day of the monsoon session of Parliament witnesses opposition uproar in both houses, impacting legislative business after 3 adjournments. Lok Sabha adjourned till Thursday. BJP takes on Congress for causing disruption. Prime Minister Narendra Modi accuses the opposition of running away from discussion in the House, expresses displeasure over opposition's attitude, calls it disappointing, says the corona pandemic is not a matter of the government alone, but a matter of humanity. Heavy downpour in many parts of the country. Incessant rains throw parts of Mumbai out of gear. Delhi NCR, Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand witness heavy rains. The Met Department forecasts more rains in the coming days. Himachal Pradesh put on yellow alert for the next 2 days. Rockets hit Afghan capital Kabul, landing near the presidential palace even as Eid al-Azha's prayers were being offered. Security situation in Afghanistan extremely unstable. US Department of State warns citizens against travel to Afghanistan. Jeff Bezos, the world's richest man, and 3 crewmates soar high above Texas desert aboard his space venture Blue Origin's New Shepard launch vehicle and return to Earth, a historic suborbital flight that helps to inaugurate a new era of private commercial space tourism. So those were the headlines we're tracking in this hour, and now the news in detail. Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia on Tuesday replied to a discussion in Rajya Sabha on the COVID pandemic management in the country. He said Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government is working with full responsibility in dealing with the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic, and its aim is to save the lives of people. He said that the government has already prepared a plan to deal with the possible third wave of pandemic, taking experience from the last 2 waves. Several other members and opposition leaders too took part in the discussion in the upper house.
अधिष्ठानम तथा कर्ता प्रणम च पृथ्वीधम विविधायाश्च पृथकेष्ठा देव्यम चेवात्र पज्यचम.
Government resolve is evident from this shlok of Gita quoted by Health Minister at the end of the discussion on the COVID epidemic in Rajya Sabha on Tuesday. Replying to all the allegations of the opposition on the matter, Mandavia said that the guidance of Prime Minister Modi and the resolve of 130 crore people will save us from the third wave.
मोदी जी ने कहा है कि 130 करोड़ की जनता जब एक साथ में एक कदम आगे बढ़ेगी तो देश 130 कदम आगे बढ़ सकता है। और एक क्राइसिस की स्थिति में ऐसी ही स्थिति हमें अवसर देती है जिस स्थिति में हमें साथ में मिलकर चलना होता है। और इसलिए जब तीसरी वेव की बात आती है तब क्या 130 करोड़ की जनता, सभी सरकारें, देश के आम नागरिक साथ में मिलकर तय करें कि हम देश में तीसरी वेव नहीं आने दे। हमारा संकल्प, मोदी जी का मार्गदर्शन हमें तीसरी वेव से बचा सकता है, हमें संकल्प करना है।
The minister asserted that there is no shortage of vaccine in the country as 15 crore doses are being supplied by Serum and Biotech every month. He informed that vaccines from other companies will soon be available as formalities already completed. On the allegations of hiding the death figures from COVID, the health minister said the government doesn't conceal it, but also compiles and publishes what the states are reporting to the union government.
छुपाने का कोई कारण ही नहीं है, बताना चाहिए। लेकिन आप किसके पर ब्लेम कर रहे हैं? जिन्होंने ब्लेम किया वो मोदी पर किया, भारत सरकार पे किया। रजिस्ट्रेशन कौन करता है? स्टेट करता है। आंकड़ा तय कौन करता है? स्टेट करता है। उसको ही रजिस्ट्रेशन करना होता है, उसको डालना होता है। यहां तो किसी ने मना नहीं किया है। मोदी जी ने तो कहा कि कोई बैकलॉग है तो भी डाल दीजिए।
On the government's efforts to protect children from COVID, the minister said that trials are underway. All the political parties took part in the discussion on the pandemic.
Enemy here is the virus, not the government, not the state chief ministers, not the system. It is the virus which is the enemy. We not only produced vaccines domestically to showcase that, we also were able to share our expertise, our abilities, our supplies with our immediate neighbors as part of one large family. We are importing also.
आप इस सब्जेक्ट को लाए और जो हमारी इच्छा थी, सारे सदन की इच्छा थी, सारे मेंबर्स की थी कि इस पे बात हो जाए, चर्चा हो जाए। चर्चा में जो भी आएगा उसका फायदा सरकार भी उठाएगी और लोगों को राहत मिलेगी। इसी दृष्टि से हम इस चर्चे को डिमांड कर रहे थे।
The debate not only allowed the government to clear the air on many issues, but also allowed opposition members to raise their views on the matter. With Parliament team, DD India.
And let's now take a look at the COVID-related updates from the nation.
India continues to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. While releasing findings of the 4th National Sero Survey, the Union Health Ministry said that 67.6% of the population aged above 6 has developed antibodies against coronavirus. It added that 40 crore people are still vulnerable to the disease.
Amongst the adult population, that is more than 18, there was no vaccine in 12,607, that is 62.2% did not have any vaccination. 24.8% of the people surveyed in the adult population had one dose of the vaccination, and 13% of the individuals had both doses of the vaccine. Now here we have this number, that is the overall seroprevalence is 67.6% in the entire population, which is from 6 years and adults included.
Sero survey was carried out on 28,975 people in 70 districts spanning 21 states. 10 wards or villages were chosen from each district for the survey. Over 50% of children aged 6 to 17 years have developed antibodies against COVID. Around 85% of the surveyed healthcare workers had antibodies. The Health Ministry has issued guidelines according to the results of the survey.
Societal, public, religious and political congregations be avoided. non-essential travel be discouraged, and travel only if fully vaccinated. So these are some of the messages in terms of the implications.
ICMR has said that if the schools are open, then the primary schools must be opened first, but added a caveat that the support staff must be vaccinated.
Once India starts considering, and the districts start considering, it will be wise to open primary schools first, and that should be done before the schools for secondary schools. And also we have to ensure that all the support staff, whether it be the school bus drivers or the teachers or the staff in the schools, they need to be vaccinated.
Meanwhile, India has reported 30,093 new cases in the last 24 hours, lowest in 125 days. India's active caseload is currently at 4,06,130, lowest in 117 days. Active cases currently constitute 1.30% of total cases. The recovery rate has increased to 97.37%, and 45,254 patients have recovered during last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has appealed to the MPs to encourage people to take the jab and also urged people to go for vaccination. Talking during the BJP PP meet, he also cautioned MPs to remain alert for a possible surge in cases. The Supreme Court has pulled up the Kerala government for relaxation in COVID curbs, adding that the state has given in to the demand of traders. The apex court called it an alarming and sorry state of affairs. Court observed that the relaxation was even done in zones witnessing a positivity rate of 15% or more. The court warned that it will take action if the easing of curbs leads to further spread of the virus. Kerala has relaxed lockdown regulations for Eid festival. The relaxations were for 3 days in those local bodies which fall under A, B and C categories based on test positivity rate. Bureau Report, DD News.
And talking about the monsoon session of Parliament, both the Houses of Parliament witnessed stormy scenes on the second consecutive day on Tuesday over various issues, including alleged Pegasus snooping. The Lok Sabha was adjourned for the day after seeing multiple adjournments. Two important bills were to be introduced in the Lok Sabha, which got stalled due to the ruckus in the House.
Lok Sabha witnessed another stormy scene on the second consecutive day on Tuesday over various issues, including alleged Pegasus snooping. The House was adjourned for the day after seeing multiple adjournments. As soon as the Lok Sabha proceedings began on Tuesday, the Congress and opposition members started ruckus over the alleged Pegasus spying controversy and demanded a joint parliamentary committee to probe the matter. Then the Lok Sabha had to be adjourned till 2 p.m. The House witnessed the similar scenes when it met at 2 p.m. Then the chair adjourned the House for another hour till 3 p.m. When the Lok Sabha met after second adjournment at 3 p.m., opposition members again trooped into the well raising the same issue. The chair adjourned the House for the day. BJP strongly criticized the stand of Congress in this matter.
A JPC is welcome, but more than a JPC, we want a probe with a judicial oversight. Whether that happens through a commissions of inquiry or through a sitting Supreme Court judge, we will wait and see how the government responds.
सरकार ने संसद के भीतर पक्ष रखा, आईटी मंत्री होने के नाते संसद ने अपना पक्ष रखा है, पार्टी ने अपना पक्ष रख दिया है. इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि प्रतिपक्ष को चर्चा करनी चाहिए और सदन चलने देना चाहिए. मुझे ज्यादा बेहतर तरीका होगा.
Lok Sabha had witnessed the similar scenes over Pegasus issue on Monday. The issue was also discussed in the BJP parliamentary party meeting, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi accused the opposition of running away from the discussion. Prime Minister Modi described the attitude of the opposition, especially the Congress, as disappointing.
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी हमारे सभी एमपीओ को आग्रह किया है, जो वैक्सीनेशन का प्रोग्राम है और गरीब कल्याण योजना है, ये सभी गरीब तक पहुंचना चाहिए. इसके लिए भी हमको प्रयास करना चाहिए. ये कॉल माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने किया है.
Prime Minister called the COVID pandemic a humanitarian matter and not a political matter. He asserted that the government had ensured no one goes hungry during the pandemic. He also expressed concern about the approach of the opposition amid the ongoing pandemic, especially the Congress. Two important bills were to be introduced in the Lok Sabha on the second day of the monsoon session, which got stalled due to ruckus in the House. Parliament Team, Bureau Report, DD India.
The Prime Minister Narendra Modi has greeted the people on the occasion of Ashadi Ekadashi. In a tweet, the Prime Minister said, on the auspicious occasion of Ekadashi, my greetings to everyone. On this special day, we pray to Lord Vithal to bless us with abundance of happiness and good health. The Warkari movement represents the finest of our traditions and emphasizes on harmony and equality. Rains continue to lash several parts of the nation. Southwest monsoon has covered the entire nation already, and many parts are now bearing the brunt of heavy showers. Places in North India and western parts report loss of property and life following incessant rains. Red alert has been issued for the Konkan areas in Maharashtra, including Mumbai, for the next 24 hours.
Rain continued to lash several parts of the country, including national capital Delhi and Mumbai on Tuesday. The Indian Meteorological Department has issued an orange alert of heavy to very heavy rain in Himachal Pradesh. The IMD has also released flash flood guidelines for the state and appealed to tourists and locals to stay away from rivers. Several houses have been damaged in Kangra district due to flash floods. Jammu has also witnessed waterlogging due to heavy rain since Monday night. Incidents of landslides have also been reported from several hilly areas. Owing to heavy rain, the wall of an old bus stand collapsed in Rajouri district, claiming the life of one person. Incessant rain continued to pummel several cities of Maharashtra, including Mumbai. IMD has issued a red alert for Mumbai, Thane, Palghar. Rainfall continued in Delhi on Tuesday, causing waterlogging and traffic jams in several areas of the national capital. In Rajasthan, monsoon reached Alwar district with several areas under it receiving record rainfall. Heavy rainfall has also been witnessed in several areas of Uttar Pradesh. Bureau Report, Today India.
The Prime Minister has applauded the reply by Health Minister in the Parliament. He tweeted, and I quote, "This extensive speech by Shri Mansukh Mandavia covers several aspects related to COVID-19 in an insightful and sensitive manner. I would request you all to hear his remarks." Unquote. Well, talking about Afghanistan, at least 3 rockets landed near the Afghan presidential palace on Tuesday as President Ashraf Ghani and other leaders marked the start of Eid al-Adha with prayers in the palace garden. Though no one has immediately claimed responsibility for the attack, President Ghani in his Eid address said the Taliban have no intention and willingness for peace. Multiple rockets hit the outer periphery of the presidential palace, just as President Ashraf Ghani and his colleagues gather in the palace gardens to offer Eid prayers. Allahu Akbar. There were no injuries as the rockets landed outside the heavily fortified palace grounds. Though no one immediately claimed responsibility for the attack, President Ghani in his address following the morning prayers said the Taliban have no intention and willingness for peace. Ghani also deplored his government's decision to release 5,000 Taliban prisoners to get the peace talks started last year as a big mistake and said that only strengthened the insurgents. Abdullah, the number 2 in Ghani government, was also offering Eid prayers inside the palace at the time of the rocket attack, having returned on Monday from peace talks with the Taliban in Doha. The 2 days of meetings in Doha, the highest level of negotiations between Kabul and Taliban so far, aimed at jump-starting stalled talks, ended without a concrete outcome. In his speech, Ghani also assailed Pakistan, which Kabul blames for harboring the Taliban leadership and providing a safe haven and assistance to the insurgents. Meanwhile, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan called on the United States to provide financial, logistical and diplomatic support so that Turkey can agree to run and guard the Kabul airport after other foreign troops withdraw from Afghanistan.
Diplomasi noktasında Amerika bizim yanımızda yer alıyor.
First of all, the United States will take sides with us in terms of diplomacy and diplomatic relations. Secondly, in terms of logistics, they will use every means available for us. They will hand over every logistical ability they have to Turkey, and finally there will be serious financial and administrative difficulties during this process. They will give the necessary support to Turkey in this respect as well. If these conditions could be met, we are thinking of taking over the management of Kabul airport.
Verecek. Eğer bunlar sağlanabilirse
Ankara has been in talks with Washington for over several weeks regarding this. The Taliban, however, have warned Turkey against it. Insecurity has been growing in Afghanistan, largely spurred by fighting in its provinces as foreign troops withdraw and Taliban make territorial gains. The worsening security situation across Afghanistan in the wake of Taliban advances has forced an estimated 270,000 from their homes since January, according to UN refugee agency UNHCR, bringing the total of internally displaced persons in Afghanistan to more than 3.5 million. Bureau Report, DD India. And that brings us to our In Focus tonight, Afghanistan at Crossroads. Our In Focus tonight is Afghanistan at Crossroads. We'll be discussing that, and to discuss that I'm joined by Amar Sinha, former Indian ambassador to Afghanistan, and also by Vishal Chandra. He's a research fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis. Thank you both gentlemen for joining us on the show. First to you, Ambassador Sinha. Today these rockets reach the vicinity of the presidential palace, while President Ghani Abdullah, his number 2 in his government, and other cabinet colleagues were offering prayers in the presidential garden. Taliban, though officially hasn't claimed responsibility for it, but what is the message that they are sending? Are they saying that we are at the doors of Kabul now?
Good evening. Let me first wish all your viewers a very happy Eid. Today is Bakrid, and that's what the prayer was about in the morning. Well, I don't think it is really at the gates of Kabul, because these rocket attacks have happened every year. In fact, if you remember, there were rockets fired even when President Ghani was being sworn in. This was on 9th of March 2020. And even before, in the 3 years that I was here, they had at least 3 incidents where rockets were fired. And these are very easy. They get onto the mountains. These are not rockets which are sort of targeted. These generally they spray it in the general direction of the city and the presidential palace, and invariably they miss the target. But the message really is that no matter how much you talk to them, what joint statements they issue, what promises they make, that Taliban is bent upon forcing an issue militarily, and they would like to come to power fighting. That is very clear, and obviously they have no regard for people who are actually praying together. And besides others, there was also former President Karzai there today in the morning.
Okay. Vishal Chandra, let me bring you in. What do you make of the strategy of Taliban? You know, on one hand, they go to Doha, they talk with the Afghan government, though not much came out of it. They said, fine, we'll talk again. But what do they want to do? What is their strategy? Seize it by force, or is it that gain as much control as you can because the Americans and the NATO forces are withdrawing? So when they come at the negotiating table, they come from a point of strength.
Well, I think what we need to understand is that Taliban are trying to take Afghanistan back to 2001. These bomb blasts, these suicide attacks or rocket attacks are part of a broader agenda, which is to reverse the process that began with the overthrow of their Islamic Emirate in 2001. I think we often talk about protecting the gains that Afghanistan has made last 2 decades, and that is precisely what they want to reverse, because there were 3 important achievements of a process that we hardly discuss these days, that is Bonn process, which began in 2001 after the overthrow of the Taliban regime, end of 2001. One big achievement of the Bonn process was to sovereignize the militia groups in Afghanistan. Second was the drafting of a new constitution that acknowledged the social and political diversity of country. And third was the electoral democracy as part of the constitutional framework that evolved. So I think the whole idea of continuously attacking government establishments or targeting the educated section of the Afghan society or targeting hospitals, mosques, schools is basically to take Afghanistan back to 2001, undo whatever Afghanistan has achieved in the last 20 years. Now they have already achieved their first objective, first of the two, that is withdrawal of all foreign forces from Afghanistan, which was largely met during the US-Taliban negotiations and finally with the signing of the agreement on February 29 last year. The second objective is still to be achieved, which is the establishment of an Islamic emirate.
Okay, establishment of an Islamic emirate, says Vishal Chandra, but Ambassador Sinha, when the world is telling them that sit down, get onto the table, talk, hold a ceasefire, they can be an agreement reached where you become a part of the political process and power sharing can be done with you, then when the world insists, why take it by force? The world is anyway offering it to you. What is the strategy or the thinking of the Taliban behind it?
You see, Afghanistan is an Islamic nation. It's 99% Islam, but they are also a very religious and a sort of a conservative society. So when they talk of this Islamic state and emirates, it's basically imposing their interpretation of Islam, which not necessarily was the Afghan version of Islam, which was more Sufi, more pluralistic, more sort of accommodating. So it's an imported ideology that they wish to impose. And obviously, what they see standing in their way is first the educated class. One of the major gains was what Vishalji said was the education. So if you look at the attacks on universities, the number of schools that have been destroyed, so for some reason they are absolutely against any sort of education, because obviously an educated, aware public questions their narrative. Second, of course, is that they are enforcing a certain regime on the women, and you have seen some very reprehensible statements and actions already, especially one that is sort of identifying women above 18 who are single and widows below 45 who are widowed, but they have to necessarily reconvert into Islam. That I think find is quite bizarre, but they would reconvert them and they will have to get married to the fighters. So this is basically like a marauding army of the past. And you see, it is not only pulling Afghanistan back, that is their vision to bring back the emirates or their system of governance, but it is really pulling Afghanistan 1400 years ago. It is back into medieval ages, and that is what is worrying.
No, Ambassador, it's, of course, we can look at it, taking Afghanistan back to the medieval ages. The Taliban believe that that is the purer form of Islam, or whatever their idea or version of Islam and Sharia that they wish to impose on Afghanistan. My question simply, and Vishal, let me ask you this, that when the world is ready to give you a power sharing agreement, say come to the table, you anyway control about 85% of the country, you are in a position of strength, then why take it by force? Come, when you become a political player, you become a political power, you can impose your version or negotiate to whatever extent your version, but why are they hell-bent on taking it by force?
Well, there are two important points here. Number one is, since Taliban is not a monolith, there are various groups within the Taliban. It seems that a section of the senior, older generation of leaders, the generation gap might be there. So the older leadership has, or sections of old leadership, let's say, have realized the value of diplomacy. And that precisely explains their outreach, and they have been extremely adaptive. They know how to play to the gallery. They know, they put on a moderate face when they're addressing a wider, bigger audience. But when it comes to, to people back at home, they tend to impose their own ideology. So there is no fundamental change as far as their ideology is concerned, but their tactics, especially when it comes to dealing with regional countries or with the wider Western world, has definitely undergone a massive change. Now, having said that, a section of older leadership might have realized the value of diplomacy, because see, there were two very frustrating factors for the Taliban regime back in 90s. One was lack of international recognition and lack of international aid and assistance. Now, this is something they are going to need if they were to join the political process in Afghanistan. So there is a realization that they need to find ways to engage the regional countries and the international community, and particularly the United States and its NATO partners. But at the same time, there is a broader, much more influential, much more dominant, section within the Taliban, which has long waited for a post-West scenario where they would like to dictate terms and conditions for the other groups in Afghanistan. So I think one of the purpose of attacking, increasing the attacks against Kabul and the Afghan government is to send out a message even to the Afghan national security forces. The idea is to demoralize them at the same time, because they have been trying to wean away as many Afghan army personnel and police personnel are concerned.
True.
So it's part of a comprehensive strategy, and Taliban may be decentralized, but they are not fragmented at the moment. So that is why I said the overall idea is to replace the current political system, to discard the current constitution, and then try and have a new political system where they get to play a more dominant role, because they need to send out a message to their thousands of fighters. They need to keep them engaged. They need to convince them that since they have won the battle, rather won the war against the West, against the United States, a reigning superpower, they are in a position where they can dictate terms and conditions to the other groups. So the whole thing boils down to the basic question which has long been a challenge for Afghanistan. That is how to have a system which is inclusive, which is multi-ethnic, which is representative. That is why I said, they are taking Afghanistan back to 2001.
Okay. Ambassador Sinha, the Western forces are going back home. We know what the situation in Afghanistan now is. There's fighting going on in almost every province. 3.5 million people internally displaced. This is what the UNHCR report says. So it's a evolving humanitarian crisis of huge proportions, which is set to increase in the coming days or months or weeks. What does the world do now? What can the regional powers step in? Is there unanimity? Are there contradictions? India has been calling for a regional response. Could we see one? If we could, or if we couldn't, what would be the contours of that would play out, what we could see playing out in the coming months?
Well, let me just answer the first, why they're doing this, because they were actually getting a ride on the back of Doha Agreement to power sharing. But they are not interested in power sharing. They want absolute control. And then why are they destroying their own country, which they hope to govern? Well, that brings you to the question whether they are in control of their own actions, or they are acting as a proxy, which tends to first weaken Afghanistan completely, so that it becomes dependent. Second, in terms of regional consensus, unfortunately there isn't. But I see signs that there could be some hope, because most of the countries which had started engaging Taliban was in the hope that they are changed and they are looking for some sort of a reconciliation. Now it is becoming quite clear that they are really looking not for reintegration but replacing the system and imposing themselves as an absolute monopoly on power. So that you can see some changes. I won't say that it's already a consensus, but there is expression of concern and many countries have now said, including Pakistan and China and others, that they will say no to an Emirates. Now, whether that would go beyond words, still too early to say, but and yesterday you would have seen the 12 European countries have issued a very strong statement because they all feel deceived, because the basic premises on which the Doha agreement was based, I think Taliban has proven each one of them wrong one by one. Going forward, I think first they will have to be met very sort of strongly, pushed back on the ground by Afghans. I think nobody else will do it. Foreign troops are leaving or have left, majority. So the community pushback, which has to stop them in the tracks. And for that, whatever assistance regional countries can provide to the Afghan security forces in terms of training and equipment, I think that will only strengthen the hands of the government. And it needs 2 to 3 months for this tide to turn. And I'm hoping that this will turn.
Okay. Vishal Chandra, from Dushanbe to Tashkent to the Indian foreign minister in Tehran and later with Sergei Lavrov in Moscow, you know, concerns were expressed. India, for its part, pushed for saying that, you know, there should be some sort of a regional response to it, which should be in the interest of Afghanistan, but what is in the interest of Afghanistan is in the interest of the region, basically pushing for strengthening the hands of the Afghan national forces rather than a NATO kind of external intervention or boots on the ground. But, you know, let me reiterate what I asked Ambassador Sinha. Is there consensus in that? Does China see it as you do? Pakistan surely doesn't see it the way you do. Does the Russian position coincide with yours? Do the Central Asian nations see it the way the others see it? Could we see that translating, that concern translating down into any sort of action?
I think if we try and widen the canvas and look at the broader regional picture, I think there are growing concerns in all the regional capitals. In fact, if one tracks Pakistani media and comments coming from within Pakistan, there is a concern even among sections of Pakistani establishment, it seems. Russians, they have their own reasons to worry about the deteriorating security in the north. See, this is a new feature, unlike back in the 1990s when Taliban had a tough time moving against Commander Masood, who held on to Panjshir, Badakhshan in 99, 2000, 2001. These were the regions which they couldn't control, which they couldn't capture at that point of time, and that explains why their focus is on northern Afghanistan, bordering Tajikistan, POK, and Uzbekistan and China via the Khan corridor. So definitely there is a concern, and Taliban have enough leverages. So when they say that they will de-link from international terrorist organizations or regional Islamist groups, be it Uyghur, Tajik militant groups or Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, I have my doubts about it, because this is what gives them, these linkages actually helps them in having leverages vis-a-vis the neighboring countries. So I don't think they're in a position or they have any reasons to give up, their linkages with these other Islamist groups which are active in the region. Secondly, well, I don't think there's a peace process on at the moment. What we have seen at Doha and other venues are basically interactions. These are formal or informal interactions. These are not systematic, negotiations taking place. The talks haven't started, in my view. Negotiations haven't started as of now, and as Ambassador Sahab very rightly said, that they are not positioned, they haven't positioned themselves for a political settlement of the conflict, for finding a peaceful way to settle the Afghan conflict. So Taliban, as I said earlier, their objectives remain the same, their ideology remains the same. And though there is a realization, as I said earlier, I think it's not going to be easy for the pro-talks section, let's say, to sell the idea of sharing power or being part of a much broader and an inclusive setup. Selling this idea of sharing power to the younger and more uncompromising generation of fighters is going to be very difficult. We need to understand, just as there is a post-2001 Afghanistan which has benefited from the international engagement, similarly Taliban too have post-2001 generation, very young fighters fighting with them. But as Taliban expand, the competition among various groups that comprise Taliban too could be growing, and that explains their efforts at consolidating their respective bases, their respective hold over respective areas. And this battle that we are seeing, that war, is not just about capturing political power, it's also about capturing the lucrative drug trade, because Taliban are well financed as per the reports coming in. They're not only collecting, they have been collecting taxes in certain parts of the country for years together now. They have control over areas where Afghanistan has mines. They're controlling border crossing points now. So they're not short of funds at the moment. So drug trafficking routes through which drugs is trafficked out of Afghanistan again has to be factored in when we are looking at the broader picture here.
Absolutely. And as they make advances, territorial advances, they get more resources under their control. That only strengthens their fighting capabilities. Ambassador Sinha, you've served in Afghanistan. Give me and my viewers your assessment of where do you see this going. Say if the regional powers, the Westerners are moving out, the regional powers do not act and stop at expressing concerns, are the Afghan national forces capable of fighting the Taliban? All said and done, they are double the number of the Taliban, but given the territorial advances Taliban has made in the past few weeks after the decision was announced that the Americans are finally moving out, do you think they can hold out against the Taliban? How do you see this playing out?
See, obviously the setbacks that the Afghan security forces have suffered recently, I think it has come as a surprise. I say surprise because obviously they were trained to be a counterinsurgency force, but suddenly the air support and the logistical support which sort of went away has hampered them, and they were not equipped to deal with it. But you see, they will have to refashion this war. You cannot really fight an Afghan war with NATO standards of support, which depends on technology, which depends on extensive air support, tremendous logistics. They will have to work out local systems which is more sustainable in the long run. One. Second, that no, it is not a war where there's one front. No, Taliban attacks in groups of 15, 20, 30. They come on a bike. They attack isolated posts which are districts. And of course, there's politics of why there are so many districts, but that is not part of this discussion today. But it is difficult to hold territory, and Taliban also, this claim that they hold 85% of the territory. Well, they governed Kabul, their total hold was 90%. So I'm a bit surprised that if they actually control 85% of the territory, why do the leaders are still living in Pakistan and in Quetta? In fact, all they need is a guarantee that they will not be attacked from the air, and they should be quite happy to come back. That has not happened. So there is a bit of propaganda. And it is not only terrorizing people. If you wish to govern and if you wish to be a legitimate government, you also have to win hearts and minds. And what they are doing, I'm afraid they are doing exactly the opposite of that.
The opposite of that. But anyway, it's a matter of concern. It's a worrying situation. We'll have to see how it unfolds. Ambassador Amar Sinha, Vishal Chandra, many thanks for joining us. That's all the time we have on the show tonight. Thank you very much. And news just coming in. Prime Minister has apprised the floor leaders of both houses on the public health response to the pandemic, and said that pandemic should not be a matter of politics. It's a matter of concern for the entire humanity. The Prime Minister stressed on the need to properly plan the vaccination drives at the district level based on advanced availability of information. Looking at the situation in various countries, there is a need to stay vigilant. This is what the Prime Minister told the floor leaders. We held a meeting with them a little while back in the Parliament House, and he thanked the floor leaders for their efforts through the pandemic. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacted, as I said, with the floor leaders of both houses of Parliament to keep them informed of the trajectory of the COVID-19 infections in India and the public health response to the pandemic. The Prime Minister thanked all leaders for participating in the meeting and giving very practical inputs and suggestions, and added that inputs from different parts of the country help immensely in policy design. The Prime Minister said that the pandemic should not be a matter of politics. It's a matter of concern for the entire humanity. He added that mankind hasn't seen such a pandemic in the last 100 years. The Prime Minister also spoke about the efforts being made to ensure that one oxygen plant in every district across the country, along with a prison. The Prime Minister informed leaders about the rising speed of India's vaccination program and how the first 10 crore doses took around 85 days, while the last 10 crore doses have taken only 24 days. He also informed the leaders that the daily closing stocks show an average of more than 1.5 crore vaccines at the end of the day throughout the country. The Prime Minister stressed the need to properly plan the vaccination drives at the district level based on the advanced availability indicated by the central government to ensure no inconvenience is caused to people. The Prime Minister spoke about the need to stay vigilant, looking at the situation in various countries. The Prime Minister added that mutations make the disease very unpredictable, and hence we all need to stay together in this hour of the pandemic and fight the disease together. Former Prime Minister H.D. Deve Gowda lauded Prime Minister Modi for his constant monitoring and working tirelessly through the pandemic. Leaders across parties thanked the Prime Minister for his efforts through the pandemic. A detailed presentation was given by Health Secretary Rajesh Bhushan in this meeting. It was informed that throughout the pandemic, the Prime Minister held 20 meetings with Chief Ministers of States, while Union Health Minister held 29 meetings with the states. The Cabinet Secretary briefed the State Chief Secretaries 34 times, while 166 central teams were deployed to aid 33 states and union territories in COVID-19 management. And the members were also apprised of India's COVID-19 vaccination strategy. The strategy aims to provide free vaccination to all adult Indians safely as fast as possible, and to protect on priority the health workers and the frontline workers, and also to protect the vulnerable population, that's 45 years and above, who contribute to more than 80% of COVID-related mortality in the country. The guiding principles of test, track, treat, vaccinate and COVID-appropriate behavior were highlighted as the way forward in India's war against COVID-19. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and 3 crewmates soared high above the Texas desert aboard his space venture Blue Origin's new Shepard launch vehicle on Tuesday and returned safely to Earth, a historic suborbital flight that helps to inaugurate a new era of private commercial space tourism.
The spacecraft ignited its BE-3 engines for a liftoff from Blue Origin's launch site, one facility flying about 107 kilometers above the planet's surface. The 57-year-old American billionaire flew on a voyage lasting about 10 minutes and 20 seconds to the edge of space 9 days after Briton Richard Branson was aboard his competing space tourism company Virgin Galactic's successful inaugural suborbital flight. Bezos gave a thumbs-up sign from inside the capsule after landing on the desert floor before stepping out. Bezos and his brother Mark Bezos, a private equity executive, were joined by 2 others pioneering female aviator Valley Funk, 82, and recent high school graduate Oliver Damon, 18, who became the oldest and youngest people to reach space. The mission was part of a fiercely competitive battle between Bezos' Blue Origin and fellow billionaire Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic to tap a potentially lucrative space tourism market. The Swiss bank UBS estimates will be worth $3 billion annually in a decade. Branson got to space first, but Bezos was due to fly higher 100 km for Blue Origin compared to 86 km for Virgin Galactic, in what experts call the world's first unpiloted space flight with an all-civilian crew. Bureau Report, DD India.
Talking about the UK government reopened nightclubs and dropped almost all coronavirus measures in England in a bid that mass vaccinations will prevent another deadly wave of COVID-19. But hours later, Boris Johnson announced that people who were not fully vaccinated would be barred from nightclubs.
These visuals from across the UK were expected. Crowd of youngsters going berserk as United Kingdom lifted almost all COVID-19 restrictions. As if realizing its folly, the UK government is now talking of putting some brakes on the undeterred rendezvous at such crowded places. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said that he would make proof of double vaccination a condition of entry to nightclubs and other venues where large crowds gathered from the end of September.
I don't want to have to close nightclubs again, as they have elsewhere. But it does mean nightclubs need to do the socially responsible thing and make use of the NHS COVID pass, which shows proof of vaccination, a recent negative test, or natural immunity as a means of entry. As we said last week, we do reserve the right to mandate certification at any point if it's necessary to reduce transmission.
But perhaps the COVID surge is not the only headache for Johnson. He has now to deal with some explosive accusations by his former advisor, Dominic Cummings, over the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. In his first interview since leaving the job last year, Dominic Cummings has said that Johnson did not want to impose a second lockdown in the autumn last year because the people who are dying are essentially all over 80.
His attitude at that point was a weird mix of partly it's all nonsense and lockdowns don't work anyway, and partly, well, this is terrible, but the people who are dying are essentially all over 80, and we can't kill the economy just because of people dying over 80.
A spokesperson for Johnson said that the Prime Minister had taken the necessary action to protect lives and livelihoods guided by the best scientific advice. Monday ended more than a year of COVID-19 lockdown restrictions in England. The Freedom Day, as it was called, was marred by surging infections, warnings of supermarket shortages, and his own forced self-isolation. Experts have warned that this is a huge bet that United Kingdom has taken, and that opening of economy gradually would have been a much better option. Bureau Report, DD India.
And now let's take a look at the COVID-related stories from across the globe.
Masked pilgrims hurled pebbles at a giant wall in a symbolic stoning of the devil on Tuesday, while others performed the farewell walk around the Kaaba during the final part of this year's Hajj. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Hajj this year has been much curtailed and restricted to Saudi Arabia citizens only. Only 60,000 Saudi citizens and residents aged between 18 to 65 who have been vaccinated were selected for Hajj. Saudi Arabia seems to have taken a cautious and right approach, but many countries have thrown caution to the winds. Authorities in Bangladesh have hit a pause button on its lockdown measures in time for people to travel home to celebrate Eid. Thousands of people in Dhaka made the journey back to their hometowns on Monday as restrictions were lifted amid surging COVID-19 cases. Similarly, France seems to be toying with the idea of opening up. The French government is going ahead with its new plan to fight COVID-19 infections and relieve the pressure that could again submerge hospitals. France has imposed some of the toughest measures in Europe. These include requiring a health pass in venues including cinema halls, bars, restaurants and long-distance trains from start of August and making vaccination mandatory for health workers. The protest against these measures have already started. From Europe to the Americas, the Delta variant is continuing to be a major cause of concern. Cuba has now the highest rate of contagion per capita in Latin America. That has strained its healthcare sector and helped stoke rare protests that have roiled the communist-run island. It has reported nearly 4,000 confirmed cases per million, which is 9 times more than the world average and more than any other country in the Americas for its size. Bureau Report, DD India.
The United States has charged 4 Chinese nationals with targeting dozens of companies, universities and government agencies in the United States and abroad. The US and its allies have accused China of a global cyber espionage campaign.
The United States and its allies have accused China of a global cyber espionage campaign. The United States has charged 4 Chinese nationals, including 3 security officials and 1 contract hacker on Monday for targeting dozens of companies, universities and government agencies in the United States and abroad. United States President Joe Biden said that he believes the Chinese government did protect those who are carrying a global cyber espionage campaign from inside their country.
My understanding is that the Chinese government, not unlike the Russian government, is not doing this themselves, but are protecting those who are doing it, and maybe even accommodating them being able to do it.
The U.S. Justice Department said the hacking was sponsored by the Ministry of State Security of China and focused on information that would significantly benefit Chinese companies and businesses, including research and development processes. The campaign targeted trade secrets in industries including aviation, defense, education, government, healthcare, biopharmaceutical and maritime industries. Chinese officials have previously said China is also a victim of hacking and opposes all forms of cyber attacks. Australia has joined the United States and allies in accusing China and publicly calling out Beijing for hacking. Australian Home Affairs Minister Karen Andrews said that they are committed to holding China accountable for the attacks.
In consultation with our partners, and that includes the United States, the United Kingdom and Japan, the government has determined that China's Ministry of State Security exploited vulnerabilities in the Microsoft Exchange software. So there is significant reputational damage to China. They have been called out, and we will continue to call out not only China but other nations if they do launch and undertake significant attacks here on Australians.
Victims were from multiple countries including Austria, Cambodia, Canada, Germany, UK and the United States. US Deputy Attorney General also said that these criminal charges once again highlight that how China continues to use cyber-enabled attacks to steal what other countries make, disregarding its bilateral and multilateral commitments. Meghna Dev's report, DD India.
And that's it in Newsnight for tonight. Remember to follow COVID-appropriate behavior when you're stepping out of your homes. Wear the mask and please do get vaccinated if you're eligible. Stay safe. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.